Alright, my name's Kevin Henley, and I decided to do my project over David Bowie and kind of give a little bit of brief history, kind of get into what he did during his career. So the first one started would be in 1967. He released his first album. Definitely was not the glam stuff that people were used to with Bowie. Um, Much more kind of hokey sounding lyrics that kind of weren't well written either. But it was only his first album. So, second album though was Space Oddity, and this seemed much more put together. Also, kind of felt like this is what a lot of people that listen to Bowie, I think, kind of tag him with. I think they this is what they think of whenever they think of Bowie. But it was much more well put together. 1970s Man Who Sold the World and 1971 Hunky Dory. Uh, Man Who Sold the World kind of felt like something, kind of psychedelic, something like kind of Jefferson Airplane sounding. Hunky Dory was a little bit more serious, had changes, seemed a little bit more, took itself a little bit more serious, not so playful. Then Ziggy Stardust in 1972 kind of seemed, that's the one that if people don't really listen to Bowie, I think they at least still probably associate him with that. They've heard of that album, and that's probably the one they think of when they think of Bowie or when they talk about Bowie. But then you got 1973's Aladdin Sane and 1973's Pinup. Uh, you know, Aladdin Sane had June Genie and Lady Grinning Soul, whereas Pinup kind of sounded a little bit, I think, similar to Iggy Pop. Then you got 1974's Diamond Dogs and 1975's Young Americans. I think Diamond Dogs kind of sounded like a Broadway play, in a way, to me at least, especially with Candidates. Young Americans, I think the good thing with that album is I love they added the horns. I think it made the sound or the band sound a lot bigger. Then you got 1976, Station to Station. To me, this is probably a very important one to me because that was the first time I had heard Bowie. Was Golden Years, which was in A Knight's Tale, and it's the first time I'd heard him, and I wanted to know, what did his other music sound like? If that sounded like that, what could the other stuff sound like? Then you got 1977's Heroes. This one felt very different. Kind of felt like a more personal album. It didn't feel like, so much as a persona like the other ones, but, it just felt very different, I would say. 1977's Low definitely, to me, was kind of another important one. It was very synth heavy, very experimental, which I love. And the imagery in the cover, I think, you know, I think looks amazing, goes perfectly with what the music sounds like. 1979's Lodger, though, was probably, to me, I think sounded like his weirdest album. Just crazy. You got African Night Flight, which is very fast paced. Then you got Fantastic Voyage, which is much slower, and just the whole entire album seems very crazy, very out there. Then you got 1980s or 1980 Scary Monsters, Super Creeps, and 1983's Let's Dance. You got Fashion on Scary Monsters and Let's Dance on, obviously Let's Dance. But they felt like they belonged in an 80s film. Very typical 80s sound to me. Then you got 1984's Tonight, which is yet another one that sounded very iconic 80s kind of pop sound. Another one with heavy synths and kind of shredding guitars like you would typically hear in a lot of famous 80s songs. Then you got 1987, Never Let Me Down. That, yet again, was a very 80s sounding album. Very iconic to that time. It was very upbeat and sounded like something you could hear in like Breakfast Club or Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Just that very, movie sounding 80s. Then 1989, he kind of ventured into creating a band with Tin Machine, much more heavy sounding music, very hard rock, and he had songs like "Prisoner of Love" or "Under the God," very different from what you would expect from his solo stuff. Whereas then you get 1993's "Black Tie, White Noise," which I think took a very hard left turn from what you had heard in the 80s. You got him playing saxophone, and you got songs like Jump They Say, and it just sounds very different, very, very different. Outside in 1995, that also, to me, is my favorite album of his of all time. It's got a very industrial, experimental sound, and it's just a great album. So he started touring with Nine Inch Nails, so that was another reason why I really kind of gravitate towards that album. Then you got 1997's Earthling, another great album. My favorite song on there is "I'm Afraid of Americans," the mix that Trent Reznor did from Nine Inch Nails. Um, I just think that's got a very cool sound to it, something very just different than all of his other stuff. Um, then you get 1999's Hours and 2002 Heathens. Neither one I'm a big fan of. Heathens, I think, is a little bit better, but Hours just kind of sounds real dreary and just not fun to listen to. But it's good music, just not good Bowie music to me. And then you get 2003's Reality and 2013 The Next Day. 2003 really, when I think of an album I don't want to listen to by Bowie, which is not a common thing, but that's the one I don't want to listen to. But The Next Day made up for it, even though it was 10 years later, unfortunately. And then, unfortunately, this year we got the last album by Bowie, since he died. And I definitely think it's a very sad album, great album, and I'm glad that we got it from him, but you could tell definitely that something was wrong with him when he wrote that. Even though it's a great, great album, just very sad, very hard to listen to, but still really good. And yeah, so that's my project.